Growth forecast for the Philippines this year on the back of strong local demand. But the multilateral lender says we're not out of the woods just yet.
Philippines can play a phenomenal role, and especially given the priority of the current administration, it can play an important role in transforming the sector, in putting the money in the right place.
President Bongbong Marcos is confident that the Philippines will not fall into economic recession despite soaring inflation.
Magawa kami ng marami pang ibang paraan para maging mas magaang sa bulsa ng ating mga kababayan itong napakabilis na pagtaas ng presyo ng kung ano-ano mga bilihin. At asahan ninyo na lahat ng paraan na maaari nating gawin ay gagawin natin para pababain ang inflation rate at gawing mas mabagal man lang ang pagtaas ng presyo.
Is the country headed towards recession? President Marcos does not think so. That's despite soaring prices, a ballooning debt, and a tight fiscal situation. We talk about the economy and what can be done to keep it afloat in this episode of The Chiefs. And welcome to this midweek edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao, and also joining us online, Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. And also joining us is Regina Lay, our news business editor. Magandang gabi, ladies, and happy Thursday.
Evening.
Good evening, guys.
Good evening. What's our banner story coming out tomorrow for the Philippine Star?
Well, may happy news at least, not 3 more for Heidelin, world champion siya. So may good news tayo.
Oh yeah, that's good news. On the other hand, may parating na bagyo.
Oo nga.
Oh, hindi. Well, LPA pa lang, low pressure area. We don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know how strong it is.
Develop into a big storm, right? So cross fingers na hindi.
Yeah, we might find out tonight or maybe tomorrow morning. I think by tonight, it's supposed to be entering the Philippine Air Responsibility, and possibly by Friday or Saturday, baka maglandfall kung sakali. So yeah.
Para mapigilan daw yung pagtaas ng electricity, hinihingi ng ERC from the Court of Appeals, relief na yung TRO.
Oh yeah. Well, that too. But on the other hand, yung ERC last night came up with a computation. We were talking to Commissioner Dimalanta, and she was saying, looking at the figures and looking at the percentages ng share ng SPPC doon sa blend ng Meralco, possibly 30 to 40 centavos per kilowatt hour ang increase. Possibly translating that to the average consumption na 200 kilowatts ng average household, mga 80 pesos daw, 70 to 80 pesos for each month.
That's less than the original estimate, di ba?
Yeah. Some of the estimates were marvelous.
3 pesos.
3 pesos.
Malaki yung difference.
So yeah.
Masama pa rin pasok yun ng January.
Well, there you go. Ano gagawa natin? Everybody say it's inevitable na talaga eh. It's just a matter of how you compute the figures. But whatever the figure is, it's gonna be higher.
Yes. At makakadagdag yan sa inflation, of course. That's powerful.
Yan ang segue ni Ami. Yan ang segue ni Ami sa ating gap. We will bring in our first guest for tonight. Of course, we'll be talking about the economy, among other things. So we will first take a break. Please stay with us. In October, the unemployment rate was at 4.5%, the lowest since the onset of the pandemic. President Bongbong Marcos sees this as a sign that the country will be spared from a recession. Do business owners agree? We speak to Go Negosyo founder, Mr. Joey Concepcion. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. And medyo long time no see tayo, sir. Sir, well, obviously the president, president is pretty confident. Ang pagkakasabi niya, malakas ang loob namin na hindi tayo magkakaroon ng recession dito sa Pilipinas dahil masyadong mababa ang unemployment rate. Among other things. But just a month ago, the World Bank president was saying that we're already, the world is already facing a global recession. Ano pong tingin niyo? Is the president's optimism well-founded?
I believe it is. If we are to look at this last quarter of the year, many are seeing strong sales, and I guess Filipinos, in a sense, will only spend during Christmas because a lot of families are coming home, tourism is open, people are traveling to Japan, Thailand, name it. I mean, count the number of people going in and out of the Philippines. So money is being spent. You can see traffic, which is important, especially this time of the year. If there was no traffic, I'll be worried. That means nobody's going out. So traffic is a sign of greater mobility and greater activity. That's good for, and we're seeing it in our sales, no? We're doing quite well, surprisingly, considering that the cost of goods that we've acquired over the past months, and some of them will hit towards maybe the first 2 months of next year before we're seeing better prices, but lower prices. And of course, interest rates have gone up, no? Because what America has done is to push interest rates to stem recession. So I would say maybe what the Philippines should look forward is that in 2023, as America sees a recession, because they would start to pause when the economy gets to slow down, and that's the whole strategy that they're employing to stem down inflation. But sometimes, the brake can, be pressed too late, no? And you get into a recession. Will it affect the Philippines? Maybe, maybe not. So, but I'm still very optimistic, and I agree with the president that this year will end pretty good. We are seeing a lot of jobs being generated, and because it's Christmas. But now, when we hit the first quarter of next year, it's a different story, no?
Yes, sir. Kaya nga, sir,
That's the question nga, di ba? It's holiday consumption. Traditionally, it's the peak consumption season. And people are wondering how sustainable the consumption pattern will be. Are you seeing a sustainable trend by, let's say, first month, second month of 2023?
January is really the weakest month for all of us because, we sell a lot and sometimes people overstock, so they carry that over on January. So by the time sales really recover, it will be about February, March, no? But, many things, we can't forecast the whole thing perfectly. But I remain to be very optimistic with what this administration is doing and trying to do to really spur the economy. And that's why the president has taken time to go to these foreign trips, not to be able to meet the leaders, to convince them that the Philippines is the place to invest. And he is able to sell the Philippines because he is a new president, so they want to know how good is this president and what are his strategies. And so far from what we've seen, he's able to explain basically the whole program on his government on how they will execute. No? And another factor that is very important is the president puts a lot of emphasis in our marginalized population. In other words, our MSMEs, our OFWs, who you can see, jobs are being generated more because MSMEs are gradually scaling up. I'm saying gradually. It's not as fast as we want it to be, but they're accelerating and growing because of digitalization. And we are seeing a lot of new influencers out there. I mean, in the hundreds, they're growing. These are young kids who are into TikTok and various social media platforms. promoting their own products, promoting other products. So to me, the entire advertising sector is changing because many companies like us are starting to use influencers. No? So you can see that job generation will continue and entrepreneurial opportunities are growing.
I think, sir, the concern with the recession question is also related to the fact that one of the pillars of the economy is, of course, the OFWs, right? So if, for example, Europe falls into a recession, and the UK actually says they're already in a technical recession, right? And the US is not far behind, we could potentially see another wave of layoffs, just like we did during the 2020-2021 lockdowns, right? Where a lot of OFWs got sent home, and that then also impacts the local economy. So I get what you're saying about the domestic demand being strong, but I guess the question also there is, should we not be preparing for other external factors, whether or not we think the recession is going to hit our shores?
Well, for example, like nurses, no, they're still in a very high demand. And in fact, there's a shortage, and that's one of the things that we're tackling under the Private Sector Advisory Council for jobs. No? How do we really match the demand for Filipino nurses overseas? Especially Canada is now planning to give residencies to nurses who will work in Canada. If that is going to be the trend, we will lose a lot of nurses. So there are a pocket of opportunities. We're still the largest in terms of maritime. And of course, there are certain sectors that may be affected, construction. But as we see, hopefully the Americans did it at the right time. So if there will be a mild recession that will last for a couple of months, and we will move on. No? And I guess it's very hard to really predict what is going to be there. Right? We can more or less say that I am optimistic because tourism is another sector, no, that is only starting in this country, and everybody's starting to travel, and the dollar is very strong. So where will they go? They'll go to Asia, they'll go to Europe, and maybe they'll go to the Philippines, no, because our currency is at about 55.50 today. So we have to attract foreign tourists because that is a sector where many of our MSMEs were severely impacted, no, during the pandemic. Hotels, travel agencies, tour guides, and so forth. No? So this sector is going to bounce back definitely, not only in this last quarter, but moving forward in 2023.
Well, sir, you do acknowledge that in first quarter or first few months of the year are usually medyo slow periods of the year for business, coming after Christmas, of course. Now, you have that as one element. On the other hand, we spoke to Jonathan Ravelas the other day, and he was saying, we're looking at possibly first quarter inflation peaking, possibly even hitting somewhere near 10%. How do you see those two elements interacting and how they impact the economy?
Well, normally the first quarter, the inflation should be muted, no, because people slow down, no, the demand for products slow down. And we're gradually seeing also commodities overseas, which we import, wheat and etc., slowly coming down. No? And so I'm optimistic that the inflation will go down next year. No? But again, we can't predict perfectly because the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues to exist, no? And that's the thing that we cannot control. But I continue to encourage that our Filipino entrepreneurs remain optimistic. I hope that the interest rates will come down because many of them have borrowed more money because the working capital has increased because of commodity prices also increasing. So they are burdened with higher interest rates today. Real estate, of course, people will defer their buying for condominium because they don't want to lock in a fixed rate. That is very high when interest rates, to my mind, eventually sometime maybe middle of next year or third quarter of next year will come down. So eventually there may be some slight slowdown in real estate, but eventually it will pick up.
By way of taming inflation, are there any particular measures that you would like to see implemented? You think the government is doing enough already?
We can't do much. I don't believe in price controls. They don't really work. And the manufacturers are paying for these high prices. No? So we just have to ride through, and eventually this thing will eventually taper off. What is more important is how do we sustain our growth, no, in our country, and that's where the challenge remains to be, no, and how do we get our MSMEs to grow faster, no, because they employ 62% of the Filipino people, the workforce, no. So if we're able to accelerate their growth, then they can hire more people. So all of these things, and hopefully attracting more foreign investors to come to the Philippines is important because they can expand and bring their own businesses here and grow. No, so tourism to me is going to be a big thing next year. No, and that's why I'm glad that the Philippine government has slowed down on all of these mask mandates and making it optional. And I mean, the COVID is here, but it is manageable, and I think we should promote the Philippines as destination to be. I mean, Bali today, many friends of mine have been there, and it's a fantastic place. I've not been there in 20 years, no? So these are countries that we compete with. So we have beautiful beaches, but if we don't put the necessary facilities there, airports and all that stuff, then we will not be able to compete against Thailand and Bali, Indonesia, and many other countries. So this is an opportunity, and I think the Marcos administration is cognizant of these issues, and I'm sure that we are all doing what we can to really spur a greater tourism climate for people to come to this country. No?
Speaking of high commodity prices, sir, Okta did the fourth quarter survey and released the results today, which found that the vast majority of Filipinos now consider soaring commodity prices as the most urgent national concern that they want the government to address. And the second one is actually improving salaries. Of course, those two are very closely related. And the third is access to food security. Let's put aside the first and the third for a little bit, because okay, you can say now, well, external factors, war in Ukraine, et cetera, so there's nothing we can do in the short term. But what is the business community doing about improving salaries?
Well, we have our CBAs, and we signed the CBAs 3-year agreement, and we give the salary. So these agreements have already been put forward. So we are following that, and many companies have their own respective CBAs. Now, for those who don't have any collective bargaining agreement or there's no union, they will have to negotiate on their own, and it's between employer and employee to be able to do that. But one thing that people have to realize is, if the company is capable of paying those salaries to be able to sustain job generation and even capital for expansion. No? So I know it's important for our people to get their increases to be able to cover the inflation, no? And that's important. But for those companies who already have CBA agreements, those numbers have been already projected. What would the inflation number be? No? Now, of course, it's a negotiation. Some pay better, some pay less. But that's how negotiations are. No?
What do you hear from the other businessmen, from the people in the business community? Are they looking to hire more next year? Are they looking to cut back on staff? What's the temperature?
I head the Private Sector Advisory Council for Jobs, no? and together with me, a number of the conglomerates sit in the same committee. So we are trying to accelerate job generation. We're trying to study how K-12, how the private sector can, start deploying some of them even on an apprentice basis. But the skills required in K-12 maybe have to improve. No? And this is where we will support the DepEd in whatever way we can and guide them through the necessary skills that they have to possess to be able to be hired by the private sector. No? So yes, we are also really pushing very hard in uplifting the businesses of our MSMEs. No? And that is very important because that's a huge part of the Philippine business community. And many of the large corporations rely on the network of all of these retail stores, sari-sari, carinderias, groceries and all of that. That's huge. No? And that's why the Big Brother approach is what we're going to be discussing also with the President tomorrow in our meeting on how can we accelerate the growth of our MSMEs, and especially our micro farmers, which is the most challenging sector. And we have a good plan, and hopefully we present, and if it's approved, then we stand a chance. No? Agriculture is an area that has to accelerate, no? And food security is very important. As you can see, prices of sugar at $4,000, and all of these other things are so expensive. So our productivity has to improve. Our farmers have to shape up, and we need the big brothers here who have the technology, the mentorship, and the market to help them. And that's what we hope to discuss tomorrow.
Well, can we shift topics a bit? Speaking of the global investment climate, there's this big continuing debate about the sovereign wealth fund, and people are saying that it's not the time to invest in most anything, whether global, whether abroad or here. What's your take on this? I mean, last night the House announced that they were dropping the requirement for pension funds to be included in the financial mix for the fund. What do you think of that?
Well, I came out with a press release today that I believe if the fund is properly run, I think it is a good idea. Let me give you an example. Many years back, what did we bid out? We bidded out Transco, we bidded out Semirara, and many other infrastructure projects out there. And Fort Bonifacio, remember when that was bidded out, I think we were one of the consortium members who won it at, I think, 25,000 pesos. No? But if you see, where are these companies today? Transco, you can see their financial statements. It just required the private sector to run the business, and they are basically printing a lot of money. It's a lucrative business, but it's private sector run. The same thing with Semirara. I've been there. It's an island full of coal, but nobody had foresight that one day maybe coal would have done and give it to the consuming family who's had foresight. And look at another example, Manila Bay. There are 3 or 5 people who have been awarded projects to reclaim Manila Bay. So if you had the Maharlika Fund way back then, and we stipulate that the investments don't go more than 20%. In other words, since these projects are being run by the best in the private sector, and you have the Maharlika Fund, and one condition to all of these investors is that whoever wins invites the fund to invest at the same cost that they would come in. And you would have more than 100 times made money. So what is the price of property today in Fort Bonifacio? It's close to 1.52 million pesos per square meter versus 25,000 pesos. So that is where maybe the Maharlika Fund can work. In other words, invest in the Philippines, but get good people to run the fund, with the president being the chairman, because we want to see this fund move on and beyond this Marcos administration. But get the best in the private sector. We have a lot of bright people there who are able to spot investments. So if we are awarding projects to all of these conglomerates all over from Malampaya to all of this, and we know that their track record of success is high, then why not be part of it, even for just 10 or 20%? So that's the idea that I think is worth looking into. And where will they get the money? I'm sure they'll find a way that maybe, I agree that they don't use the pension of the people, but I'm sure these people have been thinking about it. Yes, many of the business organizations are not supporting it because their fear is there going to be, again, mismanagement of these funds? So it's a trust factor. But if the board would be composed of at least 50% of that from the private sector, if the investments are driven only in the Philippines, and most of our conglomerates are the ones, they have the money, they have the experience, making these bids. I don't think they're stupid to make these investments because their track record is high. Then the fund is safe because the president believes in public-private partnerships. So this is one way to execute the public-private partnerships. Allow this fund to join all of these investments that either Ramon Ang, MVP, etc. are doing for the country, building airports, bridges, roads, and what have you, reclaiming land out there in the Manila Bay. That's going to be a very lucrative thing. You're just putting sand and all of that, and MOA is a reclaimed area. That whole boulevard is a reclaimed area. So I know people are fearful, but I think let's give it a chance to this administration for ideas such as this, and we can guide them through in how there are about 100 sovereign funds in the world, and so it's not everybody in the world, but in the Philippines, we know who are the winners there. So you've seen it, those who invest in the stock market. I mean, you're going to invest with the conglomerates because their transparency and the level of business savvy is quite there. No?
The difference, sir, with the examples that you pointed out is, of course, as you yourself pointed out, is their private organizations, right? So the way they run things is different. Of course, there's presumably less bureaucracy, right? So mas professional, et cetera, et cetera. But jumping on your point about the private sector, do you mean to say that if there was a proposal that the money come from the private sector, let's say top 20 conglomerates of the Philippines, would you be keen on it? Do you think the private sector would jump on the chance? Let's say each conglomerate give 1 billion pesos each. Just as an idea.
What I'm trying to say is that this Maharlika Fund, the board composition can be partly government and partly private sector. So it's an investment fund. So private sector, I mean, they also invest in all of these types of funds, but here in Iran, they may want to put their money in this Maharlika Fund, whether you use pension or not. So what I'm trying to get at here is, whatever project that the Maharlika would invest in, to be number one, it should invest in the Philippines and not overseas. Because why invest overseas when there's so much opportunities in this country today? Now, who do you invest with? You invest with the private sector. Assume Ricky Razon, I'm Isabel, Gokongwei, or who, and many others unknown who are also savvy in business. You invest in that. Maharlika Fund can take a 10% position, but no more than 20% in these businesses. And I just gave you examples of Transco, Semirara, as what we call, successful turnaround companies when the private sector runs. So, yes, join those, invest in those where the private sector runs the business. No, don't invest in somebody that you're not confident with. No, so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
So you wouldn't actually put down your own money then?
Oh,
if you were asked.
Manila Bay, if they open it up, it's just that we can't afford to reclaim the land ourselves. But if one of those proponents say, okay, I'm looking for investors to come in at ground zero, which the government can do because that is Philippine territory. So they can say, okay, if you are going to develop this land here, you have to give 10% or 20% equity to the Maharlika Fund at the cost you're getting it to. Then, we were just a small player when Fort Bonifacio was bidded out. We joined the MV group. We only owned about 2%, but the 2% was worth almost 2 buildings after that. No? So that's what I'm trying to get at. You join trusted entrepreneurs who have a great track record, and then that's in the investment side. But the fund itself has to be composed of good people, good investment bankers who have great foresight. No? And I'm not saying that our secretaries are not capable, no? But they're very busy. And you can have a blend of private sector and some secretaries. No? because it's the government's money. And of course, the president as the chairman, because you want to see this thing succeed. With the president on top of it, of course, he'll want to see this fund succeed. He wants to have a fund that's bankrupt, and he's the president. I mean, you don't want that thing to happen. And by him taking that responsibility himself, he wants to see that move forward. So that's why I'm saying, I know that many of our friends and my friends in the business orgs have thumbed it down and with all of that. But I've been talking to them and I'm telling them that, look, let's take a look at it. Look at the past.
Okay.
It can work.
Okay. Go Negosyo founder, Mr. Joey Concepcion. Sir, maraming salamat for joining us tonight at magandang gabi.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We are starting up another conversation after this break, so please stay with us.
gitna ng mahal na presyo ng sibuyas, daan-daang sako ng smuggled na puting sibuyas na sabat sa Tondo, Maynila.
Pinag-aaralan ng DA kung pwedeng ibenta ang mga kumpiskadong sibuyas sa mga kadiwa stores.
Sa order sisirain. But, it's Christmas season again. Subject natin sa phytosanitary analysis. Mahirap kasi yan, nagsigit ng sige, mas masisira yung ating industry. Hindi natin binibenta sa labas, palabas sa labas mismo, dapat within the control of the Department of Agriculture.
The Agriculture Department holds off on its recommendation to import onions this year. DA spokesperson Rex Estoperez says early harvest will be enough to fill the supply gap.
Kapag hindi pa kayo naglabas ng mga sibuyasan para bumaba ang presyo, we're compelled to, sabi ko nga, worst comes to worst, we'll import.
The Agriculture Department says it is working on stabilizing prices and the supply of food products. Let's hear solutions and interventions from the DA's Deputy Spokesperson, Mr. Rex Estoperez. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat at sa ating po mga tagapanood.
Evening po.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for
sir.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us tonight, sir. Of course, we do want to talk about stabilizing prices. But before we went on air, I did a quick check dun sa bantay presyo ng DA for December 8, which is today. Yung red onions po nasa 280 per kilo pa rin. Yung sugar, I think this is refined sugar, nasa 95 pesos per kilo. Yung rice po from 38 to 50 pesos per kilo. So, well, mukha naman pong stable, pero po stable na mataas pa rin. Nag-stabilize dun sa bandang taas. I'm sure you've heard this question a lot of times, pero when are we going to see? Kasi I think everybody was hoping na itong mga nakaraang mga buwan, meron ng pressure pababa dapat yung itong mga presyo ng asukal, presyo ng bigas, yung onion humabol na lang yun po, asan tayo po ngayon doon?
Actually, kung titingnan natin, the prices are in the market, especially yung agricultural products, tumataas. And this is normal so far as yung holidays are coming. Pero hindi naman ganun dapat kataas. Like for example, yung onions natin. I visited the market, it's 260 to 280. But in Balintawak market, we saw plenty of sacks of red onions. Pero ang puhunan pa rin nila is ganun pa rin. Ang puhunan ng ating retailers, according to them, it's 227 per kilo. So binibenta nila at 260 to 280. So ganun ang presyo ngayon. Like for example, doon naman sa atin pong baboy, ang nangyari po ay the preference of our consumers ay doon sa mga bagong kata, even though we have plenty of frozen pork, ang preference pa rin ay yung atin pong bagong katay. Siyempre, fresh yan. So kung ang preference natin ay doon sa atin po mga bagong katay, ang nangyari, tinamaan ito ng bagyo, tinamaan tayo ng ASF, no? Plus yung ating petrolyo for the transport of these products, tataas siya. We are bringing down the prices, nag-repopulate tayo, padamihin natin yung ating supply ng baboy. But for now po, sa atin pong these holidays, marami pa tayong supply ng baboy. If you are looking at the fresh, yung bagong katay po. Iba-ibang parte, iba-iba namang presyo yan. And that's acceptable to us. Yung ating problema sa ngayon, tapos na tayo doon sa pompano, which is yung ating masyadong special. Pompano and the salmon. Marami pong nakakalam yun pala yung supermarkets kasama sa wet markets. So ang ginawa naman natin doon, since 1999 yung ating order for this importation of industrial users, I think it's high time also to revisit our orders. No? Baka mamaya yan hindi na ayon sa panahon. So what we're doing right now is give moratorium to those who are selling pompano and salmon in the markets while we are reviewing our orders. And according to the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, by the first quarter of 2023, they have already finalized these orders. And by the time siguro naman, ang awareness and implementation natin ay tuloy-tuloy. No? Pero even though ng ating pampano and the salmon are present in these wet markets, the first border and the second border control, ibig sabihin, sa puerto natin, bantayan pa rin natin the smuggled. At doon sa ating mga cold storage, yung bantayan pa rin natin yung illegal diversion from the industrial users. Now, going back again to the onion, for the last 3 days, nakita natin marami po siyang smuggled. Doon sa may CP and Subic, no? Pumasok siya. We did not issue import permits for this product. Ngayon, makikita natin sa ating even sa ating mga online, no, may nagbebenta. Kasi sa palengke, when we visited the markets, hindi sila pwedeng magbenta kasi ang permit nila ay kumpiskahin. Now, those dun sa ating online, matitrace natin yan. Bawal ho at wag nating tangkilikin yung white onions or any onions na walang permiso po, lalong-lalo na dito sa ating online.
Saan galing yung smuggled onion, sir?
China po. This is from China. Sabi sa atin po ng ating sa regulations po and the Bureau of Customs, ang meron pong mga containers na misdeclared, no, may siopaw, may bread, may pastries. Pero sa likod po ng styrofoam doon sa gitna sa atin pong mga containers, sa likod po niyan ay punong-puno ng onions. In fact, kahapon nagulat kami, all the while we know only white onions ang dinsparkle, may red onions na pumapasok. So yun ang ingatan natin dahil nga ang problema natin sa ngayon, ang ating oversupply naman during harvest season, napapatay naman natin ng onion industry.
Pero Yusek, paano yan? You mean, kasi sabi ng SINAG mga January pa yung harvest nila, January, February, for the white onions. So, and then you stop the importation pala. Paano yan hanggang first quarter? Walang white onion dito?
Ganito po, ma'am, no? Sabi ng SINAG natin, meron tayong pwedeng bagay yung off-season harvest. No? Kukunti lang naman yan this coming December. Ang ating peak season po yan this coming January and February. So we still have 10,000 metric tons of onion in the inventory. Plus yung ating harvest na kukunti sa ngayon, we'll try to yung ating pong kahit ma-harvest natin this December. Ang importante sa atin, makatawid tayo ng December, yung ating holidays. But the problem is, ang question pa rin, ang presyo. Sa amin naman, we are encouraging, hindi naman natin pwedeng i-raid, no? Yung ating mga cold storages with local onions na kailangan ilabas nila this December. Tulong na nila yon sa ating mga consumers. Kasi hindi naman tayo pwedeng magbasta-basta mag-import. Maraming smuggle dito. Pag once na nag-issue tayo ng import permit, maglabasan yan, tuloy-tuloy import until the harvest. So yun ang iningatan natin po.
So sir, what are you saying, sir? Are you saying walang supply problem ang onions? Kasi sabi niyo may 10,000 na inventory, tapos may smuggled onions pa, pero ang taas pa rin ng presyo. So what are you saying? The prices are high because somebody is making money? Or paano po? How do we explain this to consumers?
We gathered information from our field offices. Meron pong harvest ng August and September ng onions. No? Binili ito ng traders at 15 pesos to 20 pesos. Saan itong mga to? So kung sasabihin natin, nakikita ng atin pong civil society na meron pa sa Nueva Ecija at manipis na rin, so tingnan natin na dapat ilabasin nila ito. Yun lang naman ang punto natin. Ngayon, kung ang atin pong red onions na locally produced ay mataas sa ating pamilihan, at yan po ay makatawid tayo sa ating holidays, pagpasensya nilang po kasi we have to balance yung sa ating market at saka sa ating producers na baka mamaya naman yan masisira yung industriya natin. Dahil sa ngayon, tomorrow we'll finalize now whether we have to import or not. Ang problema sa atin ngayon, importation, allergy na tayo lahat doon kasi lahat na lang imported. Mahirap. On the smuggled onions, before we are looking at baka pwedeng ito just to bring down the prices, we'll bring that to the kadiwa. Pero naobserbahan po namin, these onions, based on our analysis, nag-umpisa na siyang mabulok. Ibig sabihin, these are infested already. At nakakatakot naman, ibenta natin sa ating kadiwa or baka may sakit ito na makakasira din sa ating industry.
Sir, sorry sir. I'm trying...
Hindi nyo na lang ibibenta? Ganun ba yun? Sa ano yung sinabi yung harvest? Yung harvest is that red or white? Parang ang mura-mura yata, no?
Ang white natin po, kukunti lang po yan. We produce much of the red onions, especially in regions 1, 2, and 3 po. Yan lang nagpo-produce natin. Pero yung white onions, kukunti lang pinoproduce natin yan. And most of these white onions, ito po yung wala nating binigyan ng import permit at these are smuggled po yung mga dumadating.
So, sir, I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Kasi my impression is that sinasabi niyo may supply naman talaga. Sabi nga niyo, ilabas na ninyo. So what are you saying? You're saying there's hoarding to drive up the prices? Yun ho ba yun?
Yes. Meron pa sila sa mga bodega nila, no? Yung ating yun nga lang mag-inspect tayo doon sa mga dati pong mga cold storage, mukhang wala na doon. So mukhang nililipat. Ang tingin natin dito naghihintay rin sila kasi sabi nila unti-unti nilang ilalabas pero nagsasamantala naman sila sa presyo. Yun ang punto naman nila. So sa atin naman, kung may mga local producers na meron pang onions ngayon, ilabas na ninyo. Para nang sa ganon, we will not decide to import and we will not sell the smuggled onions in the market just to bring down the prices.
Pero
Sorry.
maikli ang shelf life ng even red onion, di ba? How long can you store that kahit in cold storage?
Cold storage, mga 3 to 4 months po yan, ma'am.
Sir, with all due respect, why can't you raid these facilities kung alam nyo nang that there's hoarding going on? I mean, we're in a food crisis, right?
Ang hoarding, ang raid natin sa mga nag-hoard lang. Once we see, like for example, the red onions, nasa cold storage siya. Pag may nakita tayo na may movement siya, that's not hoarding. Ibig sabihin, nagbebenta siya. Pero dun sa areas na yung binubuksan pa lang at nakikita na natin na white onions na wala siyang permit, then smuggled po yun. Yung sa mga bodega na kailangan na i-raid, tinitingnan po natin lahat ng bodega ngayon na posibleng pinanggagalingan because we are tracing from the market kung saan nanggagaling yan at makikita po natin yan. Our Bureau of Customs also, meron naman silang mga na sinusundan na pang-trace po ng ating mga onions kung saan po ito nakatago. Pero kung sinasabi natin, yung pag nakita natin may movement, especially local onions natin, walang problema yan. Pero dun sa white onions na wala tayong permit at nakita natin, matrace natin, bakit ka mayroong white onions, then kailangan natin i-confiscate.
O sige, most optimistic projection na lang. Kailan kaya mag-uumpisang bumaba yung presyo? Kasi food items made up a hefty chunk of the pagtaas ng mga presyo, ng inflation rate. Mga kailan kaya? Kasi pati yung asukal nga nagdatingin na yung imported sugar, ayaw pa rin bumaba, up to 108 per kilo pa rin. Kailan namin makikita? And even the onions, Sean, best projection ninyo.
Ang projection po namin yan until last week pa po ng December po. Yung bababa ang presyo kung maglalabas po yung ating mga nag-store ng onions sa ngayon. Sa ngayon kasi, the 10,000 metric tons natin, ang demand ngayon mas mataas, mukhang mabilis maubos yan. Even though na may harvest tayo na pakonti-konti lang. So, ang sa atin lang naman, pakiusap, maglabas ng mga nag-hoard. Pangalawa, yung atin po mga consumers, huwag tayong magtangkilik ng atin pong mga smuggled onions kasi walang mangyari sa atin yan. Tinitingnan nga namin doon kanina sa datos ng PSA, yung asukal, 97 pesos per kilo, 38% na nag-push ng ating inflation. Yung other agricultural products, sabi nga namin, we have to understand na bumabawi po tayo doon sa epekto ng pandemic, which is global. Pero sila, ang diferensya sa atin, tinamaan din tayo, especially sa onions, tinamaan tayo ng bagyo na yung karamihan sa ating mga taniman ng onions, natunaw yung onions. Alam mo naman, pag onions mabasa, wala na mabubulok na siya. So yun yung mga bagay na non-factors affecting this. Kinoconsider din natin and we're trying now to redefine kung anong gagawin natin, especially na yung pinagtutuunan ng pansin ngayon ng ating pong department is yung ating food security po at saka yung consideration sa climate change na dapat resilient rin po yung ating agricultural production.
Pero bakit yung asukal ayaw pang bumaba? Kasi nandito na yung 150,000 metric tons and the harvest has started and the milling season. Napakataas pa rin yan from the, siguro sabihin natin mga 17, nag-uumpisa siguro yung taon. Bakit ayaw pa rin bumaba? It's not only 97 makakakuha ka ngayon hanggang mga 108 per kilo.
Nakausap po namin yung sa Sugar Regulatory Administration. Actually, we have imported 150,000 metric tons. Mayroong pang dinagdag na 200,000 metric tons na iwan noon na importation. So kung titingnan natin, Sabi nga namin, nagbibenta sa ating kadiwa, nagbibenta doon sa SRA ng 70 pesos. Bakit sa ating mga palengke, meron pa rin siyang mataas doon? So ang consideration natin ngayon, whether kung kulang pa rin yung volume niyan and the milling season ay patuloy pa rin naman na magkaroon ng production, asan nagkakadeferensya? Is it in the pagpunta po sa ating mga merkado, or we need to have another importation? So nang titingnan po natin, and by tomorrow we can confirm that, and magkaroon tayo ng press conf dun sa sibuyas and all agricultural products kung anong gagawin po natin sa pagtaas ng presyo na ito.
Okay. Sir, can I just clarify one thing you said earlier? So number one, yung smuggled onions from China, about 30 million pesos worth, hindi na ibebenta sa kadiwa?
Hindi na natin ibebenta yon. This will not be available in the market anymore. By order, ating Pangulo nagpasabi na, mukhang hindi yata tama yan, smuggled mo, parang tinolerate mo, benta mo pa sa market. That's one. Second, may Bureau of Customs na order na lahat po ng atin pong nasasabat under yung smuggled goods ay kailangan sirain. And the third one is that hindi siya papasa talaga dun sa ating phytosanitary analysis na mukhang nag-uumpisa na ngayon yung mga onions na nabubulok.
Okay. And then second, related to that is yung problems of smuggling from China, particularly vegetables and fruits, matagal na to, di ba? I mean, it's an age-old problem. Are we saying that to this day we haven't found a solution to it? Kasi yung onions, smuggled onions, matagal, we've been covering it for many years. Every so often, bigla na lang sasabog.
Yung atin pong kausap po natin yung farmers, no? Salamat naman at sabi niya hindi kayo mag-i-import at yung mga onions na yan na smuggled ay sisirain din, hindi punta sa market. It's been 2 years, more than 2 years na nangyari. Tama po kayo, it's been 2 years na ganyan ang kinocover natin na palagi na lang nakakalusot ito. At ngayon nakakalusot naman, but our inspectorate sa regulations po, together with the Bureau of Customs, iniisa-isa po yan. At ngayon po sinasabi nila, I think marami pang dumadating through the containerized po ito. At doon sa Subic, 2 nakita natin na containers na merong onions misdeclared. At based on our intelligence, marami pa yan. So ang gagawin po natin ngayon, together with our people, tingnan natin, we have to watch yung atin pong mga malalaking puerto na nakakababa po ng mga containers. Kasi dito lang naman nila ilalagay yan, diretso sa kanilang mga storage. At pag sinabi natin na we'll issue import permit, maglabasan po yung mga smuggled na yan. Samantalang patuloy pa rin yung kanilang pag-import until mag-stock sila until the harvest season. Patay naman po yung ating mga magsasaka.
Yusek, pahabol ko lang, lilinawin ko lang, you said you are considering another importation of white refined sugar. Mga ilan kaya? May iniisip na kayong volume?
Wala pa tayong volume doon kasi we have to review again the inventory nationwide. No? Pati yung sa ating mga mills, yung nationwide natin na inventory, ilan ang hawak talaga natin so that we can get the real inventory kung ilan talaga. Kasi mahirap din naman na magsobra yung ating importation, kawawa naman yung ating mga sugar planters and millers.
Okay. Mr. Rex Estoperez, Deputy Spokesman ng Department of Agriculture. Sir, maraming salamat for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay po tayo.
And that's it for the Chiefs. We hope out of this discussion will keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Regina Lay of One News.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.